If you guys want to know how to get best in slot gear, or which perks are actually worth saving, this video is for you. Because right now your inventory is loaded to the brim with goodies like a piñata. I get this questions more than any other on stream or in my comments. So today, we're going to finally break it down. By the end, you'll exactly how to tell which gear is trash, decent, or truly best in slot in Season 10. But before we get into gear, we need to break down how exactly gear can drop, because gear can drop in a many different ways. Think of this as a slot machine. Sometimes you'll hit the 777s, and other times, well, you'll go bankrupt and be outside in a tin can begging for money. So how exactly can gear drop in New World's new update? Well, there's 5 points in total. This can take up either 4 charm slots, the circles, those can be changed, or perk slots, those cannot be changed, and you can see them at the bottom of my screen there. Now, how exactly should this look if we were looking to truly get best in gear? And how do we know if it's good, bad, or just plain ugly? Well, let me break it down one by one. The best rule of thumb I can give you is a piece like this. This comes with a gem slot, which right now is the most sought after for every piece of gear, whether it be armor, jewelry, or weapons, as gem slots are almost king for best in slot gear. A quick rule of thumb is if it doesn't have a gem slot on it, well, it's probably not best in slot. This is if it doesn't have 4 perks. 4 perks and 1 charm slot can still be better than 3 perks, 1 gem slot, and that beautiful charm is the final one. What do I mean by this? Well, let me show you a couple examples of some pieces of gear. So right now I have a lot of gear in my inventory. I'm getting full. I just ate my Happy Meal and it was delicious. So let's look at this beautiful greatsword. This has 3 perks: Attunement, Shirking Flames, Trenching Crits, and then I have 2 charm slots. 2 charm slots? Well, they're just there to vibe. It doesn't really matter as much as if it's offensive, defensive, as you can balance that depending on your other gear pieces. Meaning if I have like defensive slots on my greatsword, but then I get offensive on my chest here, it's completely fine because then I kind of balance it out. In terms of that, it does not matter nearly as much. What does matter are the perks. Let me show you what could have been a best in slot greatsword for me, something that would have rivaled even Serenity. This beauty right here, the greatsword, it comes with Attunement, Shirking Abyss, Attunement, and Trenchant Rend. This thing is almost considered best in slot. If I had, instead of Shirking Abyss, that was Attunement, or instead of Trenchant Rend, it was something like Trenchant Strikes, where my heavy attacks deal more damage, well then this greatsword could be considered best in slot until we start getting into the set bonuses. But right now, that's a long ways away, at least a few weeks into Season 10, and we're just trying to get by with what we got. So if a 4 perker like this shows up, and it has a lot of good perks, well then you're looking for a banger loadout. A good rule of thumb for every weapon in the entire game, if you want a cheat sheet to follow, like when you cheat on your math test, well, I want to give you a quick one. Attunement, that perk right there at the bottom. Successful hits deal 11% damage. If you can get 3 of these on your weapon, oh, then you're golden. That's an extremely strong weapon for a vast majority of builds. Now, this is not true for something like a Life Staff or maybe Void Gauntlet, but for like bow, musket, greatsword, and weapons like this that don't have an insanely quick attack time, even Hatchet could benefit from a triple attunement. That's very strong. But there is few better perks out there for these types of weapons. But overall, I would say triple attunement is extremely strong when your weapon can't attack, usually multiple times within 1.5 seconds to get max value out of that attunement perk. Next up, Sundering Stacks for all weapons that are pure DPS is going to be extremely important for PvP, as Sundering Stacks rends the bosses and your enemies, turning them down into paper. This allows you to cut through them and dominate the battlefield. Always though, keep out for a gem slot for these type of gears. This would be really solid. Instead, it has a defensive and a defensive charm slot, so if I click on it, you can see exactly what you're working with. Pull it out of my inventory here and hit add charms. Now on the top left here, we can clearly see we have 1 offensive and 1 defensive. That's okay, but that's not ideal, as a hatchet loves the skill charm on its weapon. So for my hatchet, my dream hatchet, I would say I want triple perks here with 1 gem and 1 skill slot. That would be my best in slot hatchet for Season 10. For greatsword, it would be about the same, except I would want 4 perk slots here, or 3 perks, a gem slot, and 1 offensive. That's what I would consider best slot for greatsword. You don't like skills slots for greatsword because greatsword doesn't really use skills. I know I get a lot of questions about this as well. I feel like a teacher taking in homework from his students, as it's quite demanding and these questions, well, they're piling up, so I'll answer a few more. Now that weapons are generally out of the way, key takeaways though before we leave to armor: look for attunement, as that's the most important one. Next, does it have a gen slot? If yes, then you could be looking at a best in slot weapon for a vast majority of builds. This is good for blunderbuss, hammer, great axe, spear, flail, great sword. These are sword. All the ranged weapons use attunement extremely well, except really Void Gauntlet and Life Staff. So a good rule of thumb is triple attunement plus a gem slot, and you're usually golden for your gear until you can find something better. There's some minor detail in there, but I would generally say that's a good rule of thumb to follow. Shirking is going to be another question I'm going to ask, though I'll quickly cover this one. This one's really good for weapons that dodge a lot, but sadly attunement outshines this, so in the grand scheme of things, shirking it is generally just going to be worse than attunement. I know it sucks when little bro just ain't got enough of the dog in him to carry up to that big bro attunement. Go over armor, as this one is way easier to talk about best in slot for the vast majority of builds. For PvP, you want this beautiful perk here called Shirking Fortification. After dodging an attack, you gain Fortifying, increasing your armor by 9% for 6 seconds. For any medium heavy armor player, this is the best in slot perk you want to be looking out for. If your gear does not have this, it better have some other good pieces, otherwise it's going to be straight into the trash can. A quick tip, by the way, I'll show you exactly how you get this chest piece right here. That is an absolutely phenomenal beast to my collection. Now, without further ado, let's break down a few more perks, as I got a lot of armor to break down. Another really strong one is these conditioning perks. You'll see this spawning left, right, like flies going for your pizza. So how exactly do we tell what conditioning perks are good and which ones are bad? Well, conditioning perks are going to be very bad for a vast majority of builds unless they're slash and thrust for PvP. This is primarily because when you PvP, those are heavily the two most sought after types of damage. For PvE here, it's not really important to get any slash con at all. Unless you're a tank, then you would want slash for the certain dungeon you're doing, and that could be a whole mindful of, well, each dungeon has different mechanics, each dungeon has different damage types. So now we're getting into a whole motherload of information, and sadly this video would take me the rest of my life to write if I broke that down for tanks. But a good rule of thumb is if it has 2 conditioning perks and you're a tank, I would save it just to be safe. But if you're a PvP player and if it doesn't have slash or thrust conditioning, I would insta trash it, as that's the hands down the only 2 conditioning perks you're going to look for PvP. But if you're light, what exactly should we look for here? I think conditioning is still a solid option to grab. I'll still grab slash and thrust, as that is just the topping that every man needs in his life. But what about these other perks like Lifestealer, Draught? I think everyone should be looking to get this. If you're a PvP player, PvE player, DPS tank, you want this perk, not all your gear, but just one piece, as that has a 1 stack bonus, meaning you can't continuously stack this. But let me tell you, with this thing in your back pocket, you'll be sucking people drier than Dracula himself, as that 12% lifesteal gives you an insane amount of survivability, and nothing can really beat it. Gem slots are king for all their gear. Gem slots are extremely viable this patch, as they give you a flat amount of damage reduction, 2%, to a certain element type. Then you can apply another modifier to this to get 1% extra damage for your melee or range class. Translation: gem slots are pretty much best in slot on all pieces of gear, once again, so keep that in mind. But what does a truly best in slot piece look like? For a chest piece, I would say this is extremely close. Vital Synergy is going to be a must on every chest piece. If you don't have this for PvP, you better throw it away. For PvE, it's not as mandatory, but for tanks, if you can get it, you should grab it. But for tanks, you want to more focus on the artifact, Void Darkplate. This beauty right here, you get this in Black Barnacles, the mutation, so make sure to go and farm that. For all our DPS players are going to continuously to ask me, what should I get? What do I need? Ooh, what goodies do I want today? Well, let me break it down for you. As a DPS rat, you definitely want to have this perk right here called Sacrifice Empowerment. This will increase your base damage across the board. You'll want this on all your gear. This is exactly what you should be looking for, as this will give you top damage numbers across the board. After that, you want pure offensive slots, so 2 offensive, 1 defensive can still work. but I would say a minimum of 2 offensives. Why is this? Well, because there's a bunch of charms that we can stack in New World Aeternum. Right now you have Leeching Charm, you'll have a Vicious Charm that increases your crit damage, a Keen Charm that increases your crit chance, and you'll have an Enchanted Charm that will do the opposite of this, will increase your light and heavy attacks. All of this will drastically increase your damage, and you want to make sure you're stacking all of these overhead. And because of that, you will probably want a minimum of 2 offensive slots on your PvE DPS gear. This will allow you to stack Enchanted, Vicious, Keen, and Leeching for your extra survivability on your own. Mix that in with your own slash damage, thrust damage, depending on what your weapon will do. And now we're hitting big boy numbers. Like Jeff Bezos, he pales in comparison to our DPS numbers because they're going to be skyrocketing higher than my self-esteem. So let's do a quick recap to break it down. For tank players, look for conditioning, but it's harder to judge you. Just want vital synergy if you can get it, and look out for the 1 perkers such as crit fortification when you hit a crit. For armor, if it has a gem slot, very good sign. Next up, for DPS, make sure it has that empowerment perk no matter what. After that, health is both extremely useful for tanks and DPS alike. At that point, you want 2 offensive perks if you're a DPS and 2 defensive if you're a tank. That is the best way I can break it down across the board to simplify it. Also, if you can get some good conditioning on there, that's a just pure bonus. Pair that with the 1 perker such as Lifestealer Draught, and you got some really good gear on your hands. Bonus tip, prolonged favor for PvP is going to be completely broken. Alright, now that we got armor out of the way and we're fully suited up to dominate, let's break down jewelry, as that is more essential than anything to make our build succeed. Amulets are actually relatively simple. You want 100% health if you can, that's a very strong perk. Shirking and power if you're a PvP goblin like myself and absolutely love tearing it up on the battlefield. But what happens if you are a PvE lover? Well, then you want to look for protection perks across the board. This is for PvP, as when you enter in dungeons, you will 100% need these protection perks in order to survive. Arcane protection is good against arcane enemies. Flash protection is absolute best in slot for PvP content. Just make sure if you have an element on your amulet, you are keeping it. For your amulet as well, I would highly recommend looking for a gem slot, as a gem slot here is crucial for not only dealing damage but survivability. For tanks, healers, and PvP enjoyers, gem slot here I would say is 100% needed. So let's do a quick little recap for amulet. Amulet, gem slot, a must. Health, very nice. Plop down some protection perks, now we're cooking. Add offensive or defense in your class type, and that's pretty much best in slot for right now in the game until we get into sets. Now for ring. Ring is very, very important to get the correct perks. Start off with looking for the damage perk of your build. If you're a slash damage build, so Great Axe, Hatchet, slash is a must here. Doesn't matter what you're running, always have the correct damage type here. This will skyrocket your damage like nothing else. Next up, we also need to look for another very important perk called Enchanted Skill or Enchanted Ward. These will do the opposite of each other. Skill, those abilities do 2% more damage. That may seem like a minor, but that's a definite damage increase. And let me tell you, I love when my damage numbers go up because that is ecstasy like nothing else. So I will rely more on abilities or latent heavies. After you've answered that, that's the one you want on your ring. You want to pair that 100% with the damage type, so thrust, slash, whatever your build uses. After that point, gem slot there is very good, and then you want to put 2 offensives on there or defensive, once again, depending on your build. A quick little side note here, it doesn't have to be exactly what I'm saying, so if you get 3 perks, 1 gem slot, that's still extremely good, with a charm slot that's even a skill, as I think skill is the lowest priority, and I'll give a quick reason why. Skills are only good for certain weapon types. The best example I can give you is Greatsword. This thing hates skill perks, absolutely despises it, and it wants to throw it in the dumpster fire as fast as possible. But for a weapon like, let's say, a Hatchet, well, I love Keen Berserk on this bad boy, and that I would say is a necessity for my Hatchet to have. So I would need about 2 skill points for my total build, and that is the reason why I put it as such a low priority, is because most builds in New World Aeternum, they only use between 1 max 4 skills perk on their gear. and because of that reason, there's hands down the lowest priority charm to roll. Next up, I would say Critical Infliction is really strong as well, especially for anyone that has access to dots. A 6% increased crit chance against a target with your damage over time effects. Well, that's just free crits, and who doesn't love nuking our opponents left and right? And finally, for our earring, probably the most important piece on our jewelry in order to get the correct perks. Here I actually have a really good setup, but sadly it's an old piece of junk. Fortifying Toast and Refreshing Toast are very good for PvP enjoyers, and I would say that's still going to be very meta come this season, but there's a few new contenders. One, Healing Heart is absolutely broken in PvP, and this is a must. And for PvE tanks, and I would say PvE healers and a bit of more survivability, this one is extremely valuable. For DPS and tanks alike, you want to look for this Despise perk. Tanks want the one that generates 200% more threat, and, well, healers and DPS, they want the opposite, the one that generates 200% less threat. That's for your PvE goblins. Key note, by the way, these also want a gem slot, and bonus tip here, regenerating this perk right here generates extra threat. So if you're really trying to min-max your way through dungeons, avoid this at all costs if you can. If you're a DPS, as you don't want to make your tank's life harder than it already is. Let's be honest, he's a masochist. He likes getting bullied. Let's make his job a little easier. And then the final perk you want to look for to pick up is Refreshing. There's two versions of this. The light attacks reduce your cooldowns by 1% and the heavy by 1.6. This is depending on your loadout. If you want this one or the other one, I think the much stronger one, where this just gives you a flat 10% CDR. I don't have it, so I can't show you, but that one is definitely going to be the king for DPS builds, healer builds, and even some tank builds out there that wants their cooldowns faster. That 10% CDR is going to be completely busted. This is more build dependent, and I can't tell you if your build needs it or not. You'll have to figure that one out on your own. But a good rule of thumb is if your build needs ability to do damage, you want that Refreshing. Trust me, it's very broken. 10% CDR, that's a big number. All right, now we've gotten all of these beautiful perks out of the way. I broke them down the best I could. Let's break down the charms for defensive and offensive so you know exactly what to pair with your gear. I'll break down what I like for tanking, what I like for DPSing, please. Sorry, but you're out of luck. Alright, before we get into charms, if you've been enjoying the guide, or it's helping you finally clean out that cursed gear, I've got plenty more tips coming for Season 10. I'll be breaking down every single piece of endgame gear you can truly min-max your build, so hey, drop a like and subscribe, and let's keep that goblin grind going. Bonus tip, for everyone who made it this far in the video, Empowering Toast right now is a must for every DPS build. This is 10% free damage, and who doesn't love free damage? Alright, let's go to the trading post, click the gold bars, go down to perks and charms, then perks. Here we can see all the beautiful perks in the entire game. But let's start off with defensive perks first, since I know a lot of you tanks and healers are probably drooling already. The Wellness Charm, solid, gives more max HP, good baseline. But what's above that, you may be asking? Enchanted Ward. Enchanted Ward reduces all incoming damage by 2.2% because most of the game damage in New World Aeternum is coded as light and heavies. DPS, this is the perk you want as well, so make sure to put this in any defensive slots that you come across. Keenly Fortify, absolute monster, 20% fortify for 5 seconds on crit. That's my wet dream right there. You literally will become a wall. Even PvP light builds should consider this. It's just that strong. Finally, we've got Divines. Oh, Heal Me Daddy Charm. This thing boosts your healing received by 5.5%, not including potions or life stealing. You can stack this Divines, basically turning you into a raid boss. If you're a tank, Divines plus Enchanted plus max HP is the 3 defensive slots that you should go for maximum survivability. You'll be unkillable. AGS might even decide to nerf this because it's just that good. Don't run this if you're running Blooddrinker, as that nerf is pretty significant. This is only there if you're truly only in a dungeon to get healed by a beautiful yet rotten priest. Bring up the Harnessing Gems for all DPS players, even tanks can use these. These will give you a 3% damage to your current damage type. For example, Great Axe and Hatchet, well, they do slash damage, so the slash damage here is exactly what you would want. One important note, so listen up. There's an empower cap in Neural that caps off at 50%. This 3% goes towards that, so do keep that in mind for every build. Now let's break down a few more must-have offensive slots if you're truly trying to min-max your DPS. Enchanted Charm. A lot of damage. Players like to use light and heavies as their primary source of damage for both PvP and PvE. This one will just give you a nice bonus of 2.3%, extremely valuable, especially if your weapons are split and don't run the same damage type. Enchanted is the better option. Vicious. This one is a must for every PvE and PvP player if you're truly trying to get top damage. As when you're in PvE and you're hitting a boss's booty, well, you're always going to be critting, so that's a flat 3% crit across the board. Huge for overall damage. We've just started nuking people, but let's keep going. There's a few more charms we should look to acquire. One is the Empower Charm. Gain 10 to 13% Empower for 5 seconds on critical hit. Easy to proc, and we're just nuking bosses and players left and right. Extremely valuable, as this virtually free damage is like going to Walmart and just taking stuff from the store without them knowing. It's free stuff, and for legal reasons, that's a joke. And if you want some extra survivability, I recommend putting in Leeching for you tank players or DPS, as this will allow you to solo more content more freely and allow you to not rely on your pesky healer as much, or if your tank makes a mistake and the boss accidentally looks at you, well, now you're going to be losing some HP, and Leeching helps cover for their mistakes. Alright, let's rate the charms from most important to least important so you have a better idea of the hierarchy. First, grab your Harnessing Charm at all cost if your damage type is the same. After that, I would say Enchanted or Skill Charm, depending if your build does more light or heavies or more ability in terms of damage. After that, I would get my Vicious Charm, as that will be proccing left and right. After Vicious, you can either rock Keen or Leeching, depending on how you want to roll. But always, no matter what, have one piece of Keenly Empowered, as that is just once again 10% juicy free damage. I'm not going to go over skills because that would take me an eternity, and we do not have the time for that. So now let's break down how exactly can we grab good gear in New World Aeternum. Gear is divided up into two categories, set bonuses and no set bonuses. Since everyone right now is basically salivating at the mouth for what's best in slot, well, it's going to be set. But this is about 30 times harder than normal gear. So gear without a set, we're going to be mainly focusing on how to get good gear that doesn't have a set bonus, as that will come once you're fully geared out in good normal gear. But how exactly do we get good gear? Hit enter, look in the chat for someone in recruitment spamming ECRs. You want to be joining these 24/7. They'll be going on a full world tour through Brimstone, Nighthaven, Evanscale, Cutlass Keys, Reek Water, Eden Grove, Shattered Mountain, the entire world tour. Not only will you get to see beautiful sceneries, so bring a camera to snap a nice picture, but you'll also be getting some of the best gear you can acquire right now in the game. On top of that, you'll be farming Umbrals, which are critical to upgrading your gear. At the moment, I wouldn't recommend going past 785 until all your gear is 785, and then you can push it to 800, or an example is like Blooddrinker, where I know I'm absolutely in love with this bad boy, so it's going to be 800 the second I get the chance. But how about getting other pieces of gear? Like, I hate chest runs, they're boring. What else can I do? Well, you can PvP, as the PvP tracks here have a chance to drop really good gear as well. Now this isn't as efficient, but at least you can kill people while getting really good gear. Not a bad trade-off if you ask me. And then what is the final tip I would give you? I would say click activity, smash Mutated Expeditions, and it's time to run some M1s. I tried to run an M3 today, and let me tell you, I would rather blow my head off than do that again. That was 2 hours of pain I will never forget. And if you're interested in seeing me suffer live, come stop by the stream, as that one was a roller coaster of emotion. Not only was chat having fun, but my Discord call was melting down into a puddle. Please send help, that was traumatizing. So I'll just stick to M1s, as these still give you the access to the artifact in the dungeon, give you really good gear across the board, and there's no real downside in doing it. You just can't get the tippity top best gear, but the difficulty to gear gain is just not worth the trade-off at the moment, especially if you're a new player. You don't know the mechanics, you don't know what to bring, and you could slow down the raid drastically. So I'll just say to M1s, as they are relatively easy to do. But now what about artifacts? I know people are going to be asking me, what's the best artifact for PvE? What's the best artifact for tank? So what's the best artifact for this? I've heard this question the second most in my chat today, and it was about to drive me crazy. So let me break down a few key artifacts that you need to get in Season 10. I'm going to rapid fire these off, so stay close. For tanks, Void Dark Plague is a must. For DPS, you either want to slot Old Crown, this bad boy right here, or Nimble Cloak. These both come from the PvP track, and, well, Void Dark Plague that comes from Black Barnacles, a dungeon that I would rather not have to do again, so good luck farming that. In terms of weapons and artifacts, Crescent Wave is very good for PvP, but for PvE players, you want Infernal, this comes from a dungeon, and Dorgoth's Blade. These are both from the same dungeon, the Lava Dungeon, so it's time to get hot and take off our clothes and go diving in some magma. Comes from this dungeon right here, Imperium Forge, and it has to be mutated, but lucky for you, it's mutated right now, so go get him, Tiger. And for the final bit of PvE DPS, if you enjoy Greatsword and love smashing things, here is my Serenity. I would say this is pretty much best in slot for exactly what I want to do, big damage. You can copy this, Photoshop it, save it in an album, I don't care what you do, but here's my Serenity come for the vast majority of Season 10. And for the final PvE artifact I would recommend, PvP artifact. For PvP drafts, either run creep boots or tumblers. They're still extremely strong, and until we find a better option, I'm going to be sticking with these for a long time. This gives you insane burst damage to the back crits, so when you get behind someone, you shank them in the booty, doing an insane amount of damage, nuking them into oblivion. You farm those, by the way, by opening up your map, heading over to Ebonscale Reach, and killing some other humans. I know you're angry and you hate your neighbor, so instead of killing him, kill those humans in that camp. Well, they just come from OPR boxes, so hit activities, click OPR, do 5, 10, hopefully you get lucky, open up these crates at the top here, and it will be in one of them. That breaks down all the gearing guide I can give you at this moment in Season 10. I would try and avoid getting set perks across the board as they're very hard to achieve right now. But I'll give a little bit of a quick rundown. Catacombs, right there, set perks. Raid, set perks. PvP track, set perks. Those all have set perks across the board. There's a few in the open world as well. But since not only do you need to get the set to drop, then you need to get good perks on them, I would highly recommend avoiding that for now until you can get some decent gear across the board. If you guys did find this helpful, make sure to smash that like button, subscribe, and I would greatly appreciate it if you became a YouTube channel member and supported your boy. It would make my day a whole lot better, just like I hope this video did, so you finally can understand New World's 200 IQ gearing system. This patch, I feel bad for you as this system is very confusing.